Hello. Okay, so what comes to mind when you hear the term information operations, or IOs for short? As a researcher studying this topic in depth, the first definition that comes to mind is malicious, coordinated online campaigns that are targeted that are either domestic or foreign in origin and target that are aimed to influence public opinion. However, an IO at its core is actually an information contagion. The most important shared characteristic that is between contagions and information operations is their ability to overcome features of social resistance, one of which is emotional excitement. I'm offering sort of a more theoretical perspective on dealing with information operations because I feel like the literature has been really saturated with very technical definitions of what IO campaigns do and the strategies behind them. So against this theoretical backdrop, how do I change?
Just up.
Right, the button. Can I do that? Okay, great. So against this theoretical backdrop, which is actually drawn from Mark Granovetter's The Strength of Weak Ties, there's another paper that's based on, that kind of elaborates on this and talks about how the strength of weak ties is not that important in the context of social media. You need wide bridges, thick connections in order to transmit information. And yeah, actually, so complex contagions is referencing Mark Granovetter. But this kind of lays the backdrop for the main research question for this paper, which is to what extent was coordinated activity during the 2025 Canadian federal election malicious in nature? So because these information operation campaigns are attempting to mislead users, the main assumption is that coordinated activity spreading misinformation is malicious in nature. So viewing IOs in this way can help us understand the strategies for false amplification by inauthentic and automated accounts. These strategies include promoting or disparaging an issue or opinion, generating confusion, or discrediting political institutions. Successful IOs that are wide-reaching position themselves at the core of social media networks, targeting highly connected users, again, back to the wide bridges that I was talking about, making them more difficult to detect, especially for the average user, and for researchers that don't have ground truth data sets released by the social media companies. As they appear more, these campaigns and users that are a part of the campaigns appear more legitimate, credible, and inherently popular. Add emotional appeal to an information operation effort, and you have what's called a complex contagion. So now I'm going to talk about the just sort of overview of the methods really quickly because I don't have too much time, but basically we collected election-related content on X from March 2025 to the beginning of May 2025. We collected on 3 platforms, but for the purpose of this presentation, I focused just on X. Information operation campaigns typically target specific politically charged events. So the small time segment that I'm going to show the results for is March 10th, the day that Mark Carney was announced as the new Liberal Party leader. So there's basically 4 kinds of components to this study. Firstly, I did coordinated activity detection based on behavioral traces such as posting window similarity, URL co-sharing. I won't go into those, but these are the features that I used, and it was basically using a rolling window. So these features over the course of the entire period of the data set were used to identify sets of coordinated accounts. The next thing that was done was news accounts were identified using the user descriptions. So examples were provided of news-like accounts, that's journalists and also news organizations. And then the third component was the detection of claims. So it's not enough that a post is, for something to potentially contain misinformation, there has to be some kind of fact or a reporting of an event or an issue. So that was another component. And then my research group, the Complex Data Lab, developed this misinformation detection tool. The link is posted in the slides there. Anyone can go there and basically check the veracity of a claim. It gives you a breakdown of the sources. It's very helpful and very interesting, but not tailored to social media data, which is why I needed to filter the posts for claims first. So, just to sort of give you an idea, so like I said, March 10th, this is just in the first 3 hours of the day, total tweets 9,000, almost half contained claims, and almost 30% of them contain misinformation of some form. So like I said, I partitioned the users into coordinated and non-coordinated users based on the methodology I went through briefly. And you can see that although there were fewer authors in the coordinated group, they actually, in relative terms, had more tweets. So that means that they were more active. This is also because of the nature of using behavioral traces to identify coordinated groups. But the main finding of this paper, and actually the initial hypothesis, descriptive hypothesis that was put forth in testing this, was that coordinated groups would share more misinformation, but as I will show later, it's actually that they share more misinformation strategically. So, coordinated users shared more claims and also more misinformation, like I said, in relative terms. So this is out of all tweets by coordinated users and all tweets by other non-coordinated users. And then the interesting thing that happens is that when we focus on just the claim tweets, so tweets that contain something that is verifiable or not, you actually have more misinformation among the non-coordinated users. And I found this really interesting because in the literature on coordinated activity detection and also on kind of like research on public susceptibility to misinformation, this does make sense because so coordinated users would likely, and in other cybersecurity reports, it's not just in theory that this is found, but they want to maximize the amount of true information in order to protect their reputations and the reputations of all the highly connected users that they're trying to engage with or embed themselves into the network with. And to test this, and I still need further testing, I identified the news accounts, so journalists, news kind of organizations, accounts, and I found that the difference between the misinformation shared between these two types of groups actually became smaller. I think that if I were to add influencers to this that again need to protect their reputations, that it would kind of switch back to that the coordinated users are sharing more misinformation. And those are the ones that I guess would be less connected in the group. So what does this mean? So these findings support the idea that the use of misinformation by malicious actors will be more strategic than organic users in attempts to preserve their reputations in a social network. It also shows how organic users are more susceptible to sharing misinformation. I know that was long. Thank you.
Thank you.